Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 13. Wait. Sorry. It's part 12. That first part didn't happen. Let me start again. Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 12 of our reading of Guinevere by Sharan Newman. As always, we're going to go over the copyright information. This is an amazing book, by the way, by an amazing author. This is copyright 1981 by Sharan Newman, who gave me express written permission to read this on my YouTube channel. And it's an honor to do so. In the last episode, Rihanna apparently took a liking to Matthew. Matthew ended up dying. And it turns out that Rihanna is pregnant and discovered Guinevere's unicorn. So they went to Guinevere's mother, and now they're talking about it. So let's continue. They were going to plan a formal wedding. We're going to go back one paragraph or two and continue from there, just so that we have the context correct. She swallowed quickly and went on. As he didn't return, we are, of course, overjoyed that we ignored tradition and allowed you a few days together first. Poor dear, you didn't have much more than that, did you? Rihanna was still trembling and crying. Why couldn't she stop crying lately? I was afraid you would think I was lying, that I wanted a place that wasn't mine. How could you? Another girl, perhaps? No, I always hoped to have another daughter someday, and you are just such a one as I would have picked. Leodegrance would be pleased too. He and your father have always been good friends. Now we must think only of you and caring for you. My grandchild must be strong and healthy, and you have obviously not been eating properly, if at all. I will send word to your mother at once, but Rihanna, she has 3 other children, and I have only Guinevere and you. Will you stay with us, at least for a time? For answer, Rihanna only nestled her into Gwendolyn's arm with a sigh of relief. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Gwendolyn wondered how long it had been since Guinevere had caressed her so. The truth was that Guinevere had never completely belonged to her family. There was something so fragile and ethereal about her, and while they all had loved her passionately, they had never felt completely relaxed with her. Even as they teased her and laughed with her and punished her, they all felt there was a part of her that they could not touch, that had nothing to do with this world. This constraint was growing stronger. As tragedy divided some and brought others closer together. Gwendolyn, Leodegrance, and now Rihanna had sought each other for courage and strength to bear their grief. Guinevere instead fled to the forest for the comfort that awaited her there. If she had known what would come of it at the end, Guinevere might have run screaming into their arms. If she had not been only human, she might have had some warning, some protection. But the absurd thing about human life is that one must fling oneself blindly into the future with no idea of what one will find. The whole household grew more cheerful when Rihanna was introduced as the wife of Matthew. Even though all of them knew there had been no wedding, no one broke faith. Rihanna's parents were written to, and they sent word that they would visit at once. So all the servants rehearsed gleefully complete details of the bridal feast, how hard it was to make a good meal on such short notice, what everyone had worn, and what they had said. It didn't matter that no one was likely to ask them about it. All summer they had eaten their bread with sorrow, and it was more than time to smile again. As far as they were concerned, Rihanna was a lady born, and if the gentry chose to be a bit lax in the manner of weddings, that was their right. So they pampered Rihanna and showed her marked respect. Slowly she was losing her frightened rabbit look and her posture of hunched misery. It seemed to her that she finally belonged in the world. And since she was naturally too self-effacing to take advantage of the concern of others, she wasn't spoiled by all the attention, only strengthened. The joy of a new life growing before them made everyone look forward to the long months ahead. Even though autumn was approaching, the whole household had a feeling of spring. Guinevere stayed away even more now. She was less likely to be missed. She didn't resent Rihanna's place of honor and was secretly curious about the baby. But she didn't feel at home around women who could talk of nothing else. Even housework was a more pleasant subject to her. A lot of what they said sounded very disagreeable, and she couldn't understand why they seemed to have relished the suffering so. Gwendolyn had never mentioned days of pain with her children. Had she gone through this too? Guinevere wondered why anyone would want children at such a price. It didn't please her to think of it. She preferred to retire more and more into her own world. One dreary, foggy day in November, she slipped out, wrapping a thick wool cloak about her. She was sick of hearing about labor pains and wanted the restoring companionship of her unicorn. She found him, but for the first time, his thoughts were distant in her mind. She caressed his shimmering mane and drew her arms around his neck, but he didn't radiate the warmth she had expected. She was afraid to speak to him aloud, but willed him to return to her with all her energy. At last she felt his thoughts return in her direction. "I am sorry I worried you. I have been thinking a great deal lately when you are not with me. I am the only unicorn, you know. I never have seen my own image, save in the minds of others, and it is never the same. I have often wondered about the unicorn who came before me. The day I awoke in the forest, he met his death. He gave me all of his knowledge, but none of his memory. Was he ever lonely? Did he ever ask himself why he was on earth? Was his life so short that he had no time to think? I don't believe that in all our history any unicorn has spent so long a time with one human being. Perhaps it is unsettling me. Perhaps unicorns were not made for introspection. I cannot be sure. What is it? What's wrong with you?" He went on. "I have heard, though I can't remember where, that we have cousins living in the sea. I would like to converse with them. When the rains end this year, I will go to the shore and seek them." "No," Guinevere clung to him in panic. "You mustn't leave me. Everything is so strange now. The whole world is changing. It keeps running from me. I won't let you go too." He looked at her in surprise. "Of course I won't leave you. I can't. We are one soul for now. I will go when you do." "What?" "When you go to live in the castle by the ocean in the spring, I will go too. I thought you would be pleased." "I'm going nowhere. I'm staying here at my home forever." His thoughts were puzzled. "I know I felt it in the spring. I saw the rocks and could even smell the salt." "You must be mistaken. No one has said anything about my leaving." "Perhaps not, but remember, when you go, I will be there. I'll be with you." Guinevere pulled her cloak more tightly around her. "I'm going home. I must think. Anyway, it is too cold for me to be out today." She slipped in the mud as she hurried home. It wasn't fair. They couldn't send her away again, her only refuge. Why was everything so inside out lately? "No one has time for me anymore. No one cares what I do, even if I stay out in the rain all day and catch the ague and die. No one would care. Even he would only hunt for another maiden to pet him." The thick fog clung to her cloak and dripped from the hood pulled far over her face. The mud was so thick on the path that it muffled the sound of the horse coming up behind her. It was some time before she noticed that she was walking in the midst of a crowd. No one else was wearing a wrap or even seemed to be getting wet. They were all completely silent but moving their lips as though singing. Even then she was so concerned with herself that it took a moment to realize who they were. Then she spun around and saw him. "Geraldus," she cried out and threw herself at him as he slid from Plotinus's back. Oh, Geraldus, why did you wait so long to come back? We have watched for you every day since the spring. I thought you would never come." He swung her around, mud and all, smiling with relief at his welcome. Then his face sobered. "I didn't know if you would want to see me now. Now. I thought I might be in the way." "Oh, no. If you only knew the people who had come by to comfort us, and how little comfort they had been. I had been so lonely for you. Everyone else is so different now. Hurry. Let's go tell father you are here." Geraldus must have doubted his welcome, but the joy with which they greeted him was sincere enough to convince anyone. Mark had been his special friend, and the only one he had of his own age, and he had felt Mark's death as much as if his own brother had died. All summer now he had known that he should visit them again, but he had been afraid. How could he walk in alive when all the others were gone? It would almost be an insult. Finally, he had worked up the courage, packed his mended robes in a bag, and started out. He was rewarded by the look on Leodegrance' face when they met, and the choked answer of his mumbled words of consolation. Where was it? Here. We are glad to see you, lad. You can help us learn to live with this. We will bear it together. Guinevere refused to let go of his hand as she led him through the house. She babbled on and on of how glad she was to see him. Now we can have music and stories again. No one but you can recite so clearly the story of Aeneas. I'm so happy to see you. Will you teach me to dance? Will you stay the whole winter? Giraldus was more than willing to remain if they wanted him. There was no better or warmer place to spend the winter. The lure of hot baths was easy to give in to on icy cold days. Guinevere was still dragging him on to her mother's workroom. From within he could hear the voices of several women. Certainly it will be a boy. I carried all my boys just that way, and even I can see how he beats on you. He's a fighter already. No, Gwendolyn, a boy, I have no doubt. But she has had a craving for grapes and lamb's meat. That certainly implies that he will be a holy man. I think you're both wrong, my lady. The child is surely be a girl. If you had consulted the stars, as I have, you would know that. Guinevere whispered, I'll wait for you in the dining hall. A little of that talk is enough for me. Giraldus entered shyly, nervous at invading such a decidedly female gathering. He saw the three speakers and the object of their speculation, sitting mute among them, but Gwendolyn dropped her sewing at once and rushed to him as impetuously as Guinevere had, giving him a joyous welcome. My dear boy, how glad I am that you have come at last. You know everyone here, don't you? Winawe, Rihanna's mother, and her maid Enid. Of course you remember Rihanna, but she has changed somewhat since your last visit. You have heard that she and Matt were married last March. Rihanna stood unsteadily. She was still having trouble adjusting to her ever-changing center of gravity. She smiled hopefully at Giraldus. With moist eyes, he bent and softly kissed her. You look beautiful, little one, he whispered. Matthew must be very proud of you. I'm sure he knows all about this and rejoices that he was left something of himself behind on earth. Do you really know that, Giraldus? Did your voices speak of him? She was so innocent and trusting that he could only mumble something reassuring and excuse himself. Of course I'll have someone bring you fresh towels, Gwendolyn said. Guinevere can show you to the bathhouse. I know you know where it is, but we must follow the priorities. We'll all see you at dinner. We have been so long without your music. She kissed him again and sent him off. He found Guinevere, and she got the linens. The air around him seemed strangely quiet, and automatically she glanced around. If you're looking for your singers, Guinevere told him, they didn't follow us in. I think they went straight to the baths. After all, they had been here before too. Do you know that Father doesn't allow men and women to bathe together? I really don't know. I really don't know if they do. You should tell them in case someone should happen by. But Guinevere, you are the only one who can see them, and I'm the only one who can hear them. Oh, yes, well then, I'll stay away, but only until you are dry and dressed again. So don't stay there all afternoon. I have missed you so. Giraldus smiled and mused as he watched her skipping back to the house. There is one person who hasn't altered in the least, in spite of everything. Imagine mousy little Rihanna and Matthew, and yet there is something unusual about Guinevere. I can't quite think what. From inside he heard the sound of splashing, and some male voices trying to harmonize on a rather vulgar drinking song. He cringed. What had they learned? Where had they learned that? Now the sopranos were joining in. They would never get it right if they practiced a millennium. He opened the door. No, 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 he shouted. Can't I leave you alone for a minute? You're flat on half the notes and sharp on the other half. Now, from the beginning. Chapter 10. The room in which Flora lay was white and the ceiling low. From her bed she could only turn her eyes from one empty surface to another. She heard her faithful attendants enter and leave, knew they were feeding and cleaning her, and raged at the shame of it, except when a face bent over hers. She might already have been in her sarcophagus, reclining peacefully in her tomb. More than anything, she wished for the dignity and release of death, but she knew it would not be given her until she redeemed herself. It is the cardinal sin, her mind repeated. You withheld the sacrifice. You must pay. You must pay. The punishment will not fall upon the victim. Mother, Most High, give me strength, and I will fulfill the prophecy. Only let me move, and I will do so in your service. Then they all came to see her every day. Gwynlyn patted her hand and spoke as if she had lost her reason instead of her body strength. Here's some lovely soup for you. Isn't it just lovely? And here's a warm comforter. Let me wrap it around you. The Odegrants would come and yell as if she'd gone deaf. How are you today? Kate sneaked in once with a gift of flowers. He laid them on her pillow like an offering at a tomb. But her eyes were sad as he kissed her cheek. And of all of them, she felt he best knew the degradation she suffered. Guinevere came too, and for an hour every day sat next to the bed and prattled and prattled as always. The only difference was that now Flora could not interrupt. Guinevere never looked at her. Flora wished she would. Even without words, she knew she could have made the child be still. Constantly her spirit railed at her body, admonishing it to obey, and all the while she repeated her prayer. Give me strength long enough to do my duty. Only that long and no more. I must be allowed to atone. But the weeks passed and her muscles remained unresponsive. Her terror grew until she barely heard the platitudes of her visitors. Only her own pleading echoed in her ears. Outside the White Room, life was becoming joyous again. Giraldus cheered everyone. He made them smile without feeling guilty. He sang, although the winter solstice approached. The villa was warm and merry. It wasn't hard to remember the rebirth of nature with the new life growing before them. Only in Flora's room was it winter. Pincerna and Tenenotus discussed it. She won't let go, the butler worried. Her body is gone useless to her, and I believe her mind is going too. She doesn't seem to recognize us anymore, yet she refuses to face her own end. Why won't she accept it? She has had a longer life than most. A longer life than most. Okay. She's not one of us, Tenenotus said, as if that explained the matter. Tactus and Sigillus have some very interesting comments on people of her race. You must come by my room some evening, and I will read them to you. I have an anonymous commentary, which is also very enlightening. Pincerna shrugged and muttered something about usually being on duty in the evening. Everyone knew that there was no hope and pitied the fierce determination that kept the old woman clinging to life, but she cared nothing for them. She continued her effort until late one night her arm moved. No one saw, no one knew, except Flora, but she knew it was a sign that she would be allowed to atone for her weakness. Every day thereafter she felt the muscles tighten and strengthen, and every night she practiced until she knew she was ready. Now she needed only await the winter solstice. At the proper time, in the proper place, the demands of the goddess would be granted. In the fields, the people were making huge piles of firewood and bones. They would be lit at sundown and would burn all through the longest night. The Odegrants knew the bonfires that would ring their home were not for the birth of Christ, but for Don, D-O-N-N, the god of the dead, and Beltanus, the sun god, who would not return to his strength until his own feast day. Beltane in the spring, but Leodegrance didn't mind. He had always felt that as long as there were lights to burn away the fear of winter, darkness, and death, the name of the god didn't matter. At least not to him. He had been born on this island, and his father reaching back almost 300 years to the first Roman settlers. He was more than half of British blood himself, and his ancestors had worshipped a whole pantheon. He understood the old religion, even if he didn't believe in it. Therefore, he took the precaution of having a bull slaughtered before the solstice and dividing the meat among the tenants. Better that than finding 3 or 4 missing, taken for the rites. And each night Flora grew stronger. On the eve of the longest night, the inhabitants of the villa held a solemn service to commemorate the birth of Christ. They then had a simple supper of bread and broth and retired early. Some time later, it seemed to a confused Guinevere that she woke to find Flora standing over her in her silken robes, holding a cup of spiced wine. Each year on that night, Flora had done the same thing, and later, Guinevere had assumed vaguely that her memory of this must have been a dream. She finished the wine as she had always done, and after that, her sleep was dreamless. She didn't awaken even when the strong, bony arms lifted her from her covers and carried her out into the freezing night, nor when she was undressed and placed on the icy altar. Flora worked alone that night, with no other worshippers or acolytes. This was for the goddess alone. She lit the candles and unwrapped the cloak to reveal the red and gold robes, stained with dark brown blood from 100 animal deaths. Carefully she sharpened the bronze knife. Serenely she intoned the sanctifying prayers. She was calm. Soon the old sin would be absolved. Guinevere would return to the goddess from whom she came, and the cycle would be completed. The island would once more be protected. Flora's body should have been feeble from her long months in bed, but her movements in the candlelight were deft. She had no doubt that Epona herself was guiding her hand. Flora was filled with contentment, with gentle love, and unbound Guinevere's hair, and arranged it around her body. It was time. Guinevere was freezing. She tried to pull her blankets closer about her, but somehow she couldn't make her arms move to reach for them. The cold was piercing, and it made her angry. She could hear the wind bellowing outside, and she felt a draft blowing across her. A strand of hair fell in her face, and she wanted terribly to push it away, but her body refused to respond. I must still be asleep, she thought. I must wake up. If only I could open my eyes. She tried, but it was no use. In her effort, she managed to make a tiny squeak, which sounded to her a frantic scream. Someone will surely come and wake me up now. Why can't I do it myself? She squeaked again. Flora didn't hear her. She was deep in her own ritual, hypnotizing herself. This was her supreme night. She was no longer a serving woman or a nursemaid, and she never would be again. The force of Epona was in her now. She belonged to the immortals and knew she would not return. She ran her finger down the blade of the knife. A thin line of blood followed the mark. With the greatest effort, Guinevere at last managed to push her eyes open a slit. She saw the candles through the curtain of her eyelashes. Nothing else was clear. It suddenly occurred to her that she was naked and uncovered, but all she felt was the cold. Then she heard the footsteps approaching and saw the glint of the knife above her. But still it made no sense. She only longed for someone to put back the blanket. Then a thought roared through her mind like a storm. Open your eyes, Guinevere. For your life, look at her. Don't let her move. I'm coming to you. With one desperate effort, Guinevere opened her eyes as wide as they would go and found herself staring into Flora's face. It was white and smooth with madness. She gasped. Flora stared, her hand trembling. Epona, she howled. Help me. Take your own. Then Guinevere heard the hooves pounding, hammering, breaking down the wooden door. Its crash was covered by the high-pitched, horrible scream of a horse in terror. Flora shrank back as the unicorn bowed its head over the altar and pointed the deadly sharp horn at her heart. Renegade, she accused. You know she is destined for your mistress, Epona. Renegade, she accused. You know she is destined for your mistress. Epona will not be thwarted. Even her servants cannot prevent the sacrifice. She raised the knife again. The unicorn stepped forward. Guinevere now found that she couldn't shut her eyes, and she watched in terror as the knife descended. The bronze blade slowly seemed to The bronze blade seemed to move so slowly, inch by inch, closer to her unprotected body. She saw the unicorn rear as if he were swimming through a powerful surf. His forehooves pawed the air above the altar, ready to fall upon Flora, standing on the other side. Flora shook her head, awestruck but determined, and then, too quickly to see, the direction of the knife changed as the old woman plunged it into her own body. There was blood everywhere. It spurted across Guinevere, burning hot on the icy stone and her cold body. It flooded along her chest and cascaded down her hair, pooling on the floor, and soon she could do nothing, not even weep. The unicorn was gone. Had it also been a dream? The candles, one by one, were snuffed out by the wind blowing in through the open door. The only sound was a slow drip of blood to the floor and the steady hiss as life steamed from Flora. Guinevere was alone. The crash of the door and the horrid screech of the unicorn had roused the household. At first, the Leodograns thought it came from the fields, where the bonfires were at their height. But then he realized it was too close. He rushed out into the night. First, he looked to the stables, but was someone stealing the horses? But they were dark and quiet. Gwendolyn pulled a blanket around herself and followed him to the patio. What was it? She asked. I thought it came from the chapel. Surely the revelers wouldn't dare to desecrate it. I'm going to see. Leodogran grabbed his cloak and picked up a stout walking stick. The voices of others, wakened by the noise, were filtering through the halls now. Sleepy, curious, worried, annoyed, Pincerna appeared, looking like an old senator in his long robes. He strode through the buildings trying to quiet people and to find the cause of the disturbance. He met Rihanna in the courtyard. You shouldn't be out on a night like this so near your time, he chided her. Go back to bed. I was awake anyways. I don't sleep very well. I thought I should go see how Flora is. All this commotion must be bothering her, as she can't get up to see what it is. Very well, that is thoughtful of you, but just look in on her and have one of the maids tend to her if anything is needed. Then hurry back to your room. You must think of yourself now. Rihanna disappeared into the house, and Pincerna was on his way again when he heard her calling frantically. She's gone, Rihanna yelled. Someone has kidnapped her. The Leodograns was headed for the chapel, but turned back at the call. He found Flora's cell filled with people, all talking at once, with Rihanna looking aggravated, standing in the middle, trying to explain something to the person next to her, who was busy exclaiming about the whole thing to no one at all. What is the matter with you? Leodograns roared. All of you back to your beds. We'll tell you what happened in the morning. Someone see to my daughter-in-law. She looks ready to collapse. Giraldus, here, sir. Get your boots on and come with me. Certainly whoever made all this racket has long since left, but we should check and see what the damage was. Okay. We're going to stop it here. We've been reading from Guinevere by Sharan Newman. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, I do want to say that this book is still for sale at, the big retailers, and probably for sale online as well. So yeah, if you like this book, make sure you buy it, along with the Chessboard Queen, which is the sequel, and Guinevere Evermore, the final book of the trilogy. Anyways, if you want to support me in any way, all that information is in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.